So uh, let's start again. In security config, we do have like we are actually doing all the things from in-memory authentication and authorization. So right now, what we want to do is actually we want to have a database authentication. We want to pull data from the database and do the required matching and find out whether the user is uh, authenticated or not, because we have a user controller and we expect that in future there will be more than one user to this application, so that's why we want to have this thing. So let's just start on this thing. So here we are actually creating a table, user detail table. Okay, what does it have? It has an ID, that is a serial, username, password and role. Okay, and these are the things that we username would be unique, but still we are actually creating another primary key. This is actually a business primary key, you can say, and this is actually for database. So this is the table we are actually going to create. So let's just create this table. Okay, table is created and we want to add two records. First is actually that is called a user Ali, and the password is encoded. It is in the same way bcrypt encryption, and its role is admin, and here is admin, and the password is encrypted in the same way, and it's an admin. So let's just add this user and let's try to pull the data from the database to see what do we have. Okay, so we do have following things. Okay, user admin Ali, and that's it. So we have actually created a user. Let's just do the required work. So first of all, let's do one thing. Let's just create entity. Okay, so here we can come here and we can actually create an entity. So entity name would be the same like that was a table that was user details, so we should have a user detail entity. And how will it will get to know that it's an entity? That basically defined by the entity annotations, and I want to establish a relationship with the table, so I would say table and its name would be user underscore detail. Okay, and it will have four columns, that is called private, a long ID, and private string, username, username, private string password. Okay, and private string role. Okay, so these are the things that we actually required, and let's just have some Lombok annotations for getter and setter, getter and setter, and let's just also have a no argument constructor, and we have to make sure that it understands it's a primary key, and it's understand it's that it is actually generated type, strategy is generated, uh, typed identity, should just understand this thing. And let's just have a constructor as well. It's a full argument constructor that actually wanted, and when I say full argument constructor, it means I don't want to have this thing. Okay, so this thing is actually there. So entity is prepared, so let's just prepare user detail. Okay, user detail, and it should be interface, and user detail repository, that is actually we are following a pattern, so it's a user detail table. Okay, so what should it do? It should, because it's an interface, so it's going to extend something, and that is called jp repository. And jp repository takes first the class, uh, the object entity, that is actually user detail, and the second type, that is actually long. Okay, so here I actually want to implement a function, that is why we are implementing this function. We will see it just in a moment, so I want to return user detail, user detail. I think let's just remove this thing, and let's just have, okay, Java util. So get by username. So this is the function that we want. We will see it just in a moment that why we implemented this function. Okay, so this is completed, and let's just come to the here security config. Let's just close this thing. Let's just close this thing, and let's just close this thing as well. Okay. Let's come to the security config. Okay, security config means these things we are going to remove, and we want to have our own user detail service. So when we say when we have our own user detail service, it means that we have to implement. So I would say my user detail service, user detail service, and should be a class, and this class should implement. What should it implement? It should implement user detail service, this thing. Okay, and because it is a service, so I should add a proper annotation for it, and it is actually saying me that I should implement a method that is load user by username. So that's why we actually implemented that function. You could see this function because it will be utilized here. So first of all, let's just have a auto word. uh, what does it mean by auto user detail repository, because we have to use that thing, user detail repository, and let's just call this thing. Okay, let's just call this thing first of all user, and let's just say user detail repository dot get by username, and username we will pass. And it's an optional user, so there are two things: either it is present or it is not. So if it is not present, okay, else the case. So what we have to do is actually we have to return, I mean we have to throw. You could see that here we have to throw something like this. So we have to throw new username not found, username not found exception, or say user not found. Let's just write this thing as well, and just remove this thing. Okay, so okay, that thing is actually completed, and from here we actually return this thing like uh, first of all what we have to do is we have to return a user. So when I say return a user, it is actually a security user. You could see user credential dot builder dot build. So this is the user we have to return. Okay, and in order to return from here, we have to provide the username, and we have to provide the password, and we have to provide the role. All those three things that we actually provided in that in the initial case, we have to provide here. And let's just type the username. So what is the username? User dot get dot username, user dot get dot password, and user dot get dot so for roles we have to do actually a little bit different thing. Let's just do the thing, but before doing this thing, let's just make some updates here. Let's just have another class. That class should be called as constant. Constant. Okay, so this is a constant class, and we are defined to constant here. uh, they are actually called public, static, final, and string. Okay, first is called user. Let's just call it user roles, and the other is called public, static, final, string, admin role. Okay, admin. Okay, so these two variables we have defined, and let just these two variables replace these two variables in the security config, and how we actually use a role. basically I want to have a and here we should have admin role. Okay, and the same thing we're actually going to do is here. Okay, let's just remove this, and same thing we're actually going to here, my user detail service. So let's just have a method public. uh, let's just have a public method, even though we can say it should be private, but let's just for the moment we can actually let's just have its public method get role. So string role. So why we are actually doing these things, you need to understand why we are doing these things. If you could see here, uh, like if the role is if the user is if the one role is there, then it is one role, but if it is as admin, it actually takes two roles. So for these two roles we have to give two things. So for that things I am actually defining this thing. So I'm just using object dot equal objects dot equal, and I think I should add its objects dot equal. So it should take two things. First is called role, and the second thing is called it should take admin role. uh, and okay, so if that is the case, what I want to do is we want to return news, I mean array of string. Okay, and how I actually want how I'm expected to return is, first of all I want to provide admin role, second I want to provide user role. Okay, so that thing will return, and if the case is not there, like if the case is not there, I can simply return user role. Okay, because it's not admin role, then it means it's a user role. And what I can actually do is actually can call this thing here, and from here I can user dot get dot role. Okay, so the role will be transferred to it, and based on that thing it will return anything. So that thing is there in the last things. I mean this class is fully set up. So the last thing we have to do is actually we have to, we can close this thing, close this thing. Here we have to make a change. So what type of what change I'm saying that we need to make here is, first of all we need to remove all this thing. Okay, and we need to say that basically uh, uh, so I'm saying that instead of my user detail service, and that it is an auto word, and it should be returned this thing. Okay, so this thing it should return. And the second thing that I need to do, even though I have returned this thing, but there is still I have to say something like which encryption algorithm has to use, and which service. So for these things I have to provide authentication provider. Let's just remove authentication provider. Let's just call this function authentication, which it takes no parameter, and here I have to create a DAO authentication provider. And let's just DAO authentication provider, and let's just set up two things. First is the set user detail service, that is actually my user detail service, and the second thing is set password encoder, that you can say is password encoder. And lastly we have to return this thing, so just return this thing. Okay, I think all those things is completed, so we can run it now. And let's just before we go to the run state, let's just have remove the, okay, so there is it is, so let's just run it. Okay, and after it will run fine, we will test it from the postman. So it has ran fine, let's test from the postman. So as our application has run fine, so let's just test it. So this is a localhost 8080 API user, and I'm testing it from the Ali, and the password is there. So let's just hit the admin controller to see whether it will hit the not. We should get the we should not get the result, and that is an expected behavior. And let's just see if we try to make an admin and xyz, does it able to access this thing. So it is able to access this thing. Let's just try to access user controller and then user task to just confirm user task. So it is working, things are working fine.